Welcome back to another Leadfeeder webinar. Super happy today to be pushing this particular one out. It's come off the back of quite a bit of work, which I'm going to go through now in a couple of minutes. Just give you a quick intro and background to the topic that we're going to be discussing today. But before we get started, guys, so just let people start to come in. I see the numbers starting to creep up there. Let us know where you're from. Pop something into the chat box there on the side. I see Tyler's already getting himself involved. Good man, Tyler. And tell us, where's everybody from today? Where are you calling in from? Really excited to have you all here. Got people on from Lithuania, Philadelphia, Nottingham, Toronto. That's Tyler. So you've got myself, Columbia, Michigan. So we've got a good mix of people from all over. It's awesome. So like I'm calling in from, we've got somebody in from Ireland, Castle Connell and County Limerick, man, Dave. Got people in from India. We've got New York, Atlanta, Southern California, New Jersey, UK, Ontario, Uruguay. Man, this is quite the mixed group. This is awesome. So I'm calling in from Vienna, Austria. My accent is not a classic Viennese accent, though, as you would expect. I'm born and bred in Ireland, but I've been living over here for the past 12 years. But we have, I'll go through the list of people that we have on now in a second. But let me go through first where this is spurred from and what's been happening in the background when I said that we have quite a bit of work on in behind this. So we've been working since sort of June, right? We started the conversation around, hey, we need to look at how we can offer something of value to our audience over the next couple of months, especially going into 2021. So we came up with the idea of a cadence, so an outbound cadence. Now, Mikey, who we have on here, Michael Hanson from GrowthGenie, this is something that he put together himself about 6 or maybe a bit longer at the start of this year, 6-7 months ago, maybe longer, 9 months ago. Got great traction. A lot of people were interested in it because it gives you a detailed outlook of, okay, which touch points should I be doing when? What type of message should I be putting into those touch points and when, right? And it's basically giving you a blueprint as a salesperson in terms of when to reach out with what, right? So it's been super interesting. And Mikey started the conversation with me saying, hey, Andy, I think we need to start another cadence. And this was in June. I was going back to earlier messages around when this took place. So back in June, Mikey reached out to me, hey, Andy, let's try to come together with a cadence and see what we can do. And I said, oh, I think that's a good idea. And I think I'd like to add in some other technologies there, right? So then we said, okay, how can we broaden out this conversation a little bit? And that's when Tyler came in. So we've got Tyler from Vidyard here. And wave to the people, Tyler. And Tyler said, hey, I think I can add some value here as well, because video is playing a big role, especially since things have since COVID, especially because we can't meet face to face. Video is playing a massive role, right? So we started to get more involved. We started writing out some things and basically built out a cadence. And I'm going to get to it now in a minute in terms of what that cadence looks like. But we built it out with tech stack in mind, as well as which touch points when. And then it just started trickling down into other people. So there's been 7 people involved in this in the past quarter. We've also got Gabrielle from Gong and Nikki Ivey from the SDRDefenders on. And the guys there, we wanted to have the guys on because they are really able to show us like tales from the field, you know? If it was just myself, Mikey, and Tyler speaking here, we aren't the guys that are on the ground, right? We're not the guys that are hammering the phones day in, day out, you know, testing these cadences, right? So it was really important for us to have the guys on to be able to say, okay, this is what we're seeing in the field and this is what we think works, right? So to give it this sort of real world feel as well, so, and also test it, right? So we've also had other people on from Leadfeeder. You can see down here in the bottom left, we've got Johnny, who's the head of demand gen from Leadfeeder, and Anna, who's the head of content here at Leadfeeder. We've also had more people on from Vidyard. There's probably been probably 9 or 10 people involved in this. So it's just been a super interesting project. And what we've actually come out with at the end of that project is a full tech stack of what tech you should be using when in your cadence, a 25-day, 30-step cadence, what to push and when, which channel to use, how and when as well, right? So what we'll do is towards the end of this, I see Johnny's already writing some notes there into the chat. Johnny, what he'll do is he will post a link to where you can find that cadence. We'll do that towards the end of the webinar. And before we do that, let me just give a quick intro to everybody we have here. I'm Andy Culligan, CMO at Leadfeeder. I am going to shut my mouth now in the next couple of minutes. You won't be hearing much more from me, more so from our panel of experts here. So we have Mikey Hanson from GrowthGenie, Tyler Lessard, who's the VP marketing at Vidyard. We've got Nikki Ivey, who's one of the founders of the SDRDefenders, and we've got Gabrielle Blackwell, who's one of the senior SDRs over at Gong. So guys, we'll get started, and without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Mikey.
Thanks a lot, Andy. Very Hollywood introduction there. With it was almost like we're releasing this cadence as like the premiere of this cadence. But yeah, pleasure to be here. Always love being on the Leadfeeder webinars. Bit of background about myself. Andy's got our slogan there. Essentially, we're a sales consultancy that wants to empower B2B sales teams to have better conversations, and predominantly are working with SDR teams and outbound teams to help them do that. One of the things I wanted to talk about actually was a little bit about the story that Andy just mentioned. So back in January, I proposed something to my network on LinkedIn, which was, would you like to see the ultimate outbound sales cadence? It has 30 touches and it combines LinkedIn, email, calling, SMS, and WhatsApp. And the response was absolutely staggering. So what happened? I'm just trying to. Here we go. Oh, trying to go back. Yeah. So the story behind this cadence, essentially we got 1,600 people requested a copy of this cadence. We had over 350,000 views on LinkedIn, and I don't think it was because it was the best cadence in the world. I think it was partly because it had 30 touches. So a lot of people contacted me saying, "Wow, 30 touches, that's insane! Like, how can you have so many touches?" A lot of people didn't like that. They said, "This is harassment. How can you be doing that? How can you be sending so many touches?" Even I've had conversations with Tyler because this involves 10 to 15 calls, and as a marketer, he said that's way too many. Don't call me more than 3 times, but we can talk about that later. So that's a bit of story about the cadence, the original cadence. And if anyone wants to see the original cadence as well, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can see how that cadence compares. But obviously, we're now in October. So when I had these conversations with Andy, it's like, this was in January. Like, what's changed since then? Tyler's given me a cell number, which I think is fake there. It's all 5s. But yeah, what's changed since then? Because we've had a pandemic, right? So sales is evolving all the time. So like, what's changed in 9 months? So that's where we decided to come up with this new cadence. So there's still some things that remain from the original cadence in January. So it's still 30 touches. I'm going to explain a bit more about the statistics behind that, why we do 30 touches. We also recommend touches every 2 to 3 days. We find that if you do touches every day, it's a little bit too intense for the buyer. And then if you do every week, it's kind of not enough. My background as well, I used to work for an outsourced SDR firm called CloudTask, and we worked with hundreds of different clients doing SDR services. And we actually saw that typically when we started doing 20 to 30 touches rather than 10 to 20 touches, we were getting twice as many meetings. And the formula is still the same. It's still calling, email, and LinkedIn. You can also add SMS and WhatsApp, but that's typically for inbound leads where they've given you permission to contact them. And then, so going back to the 30 touches and the statistics behind that, like I said, a lot of people think that's harassment, right? At 30 touches, you're like harassing these people essentially to have a sales meeting with you. But there is logic behind this. So essentially, if you're cold call, any SDRs listening to this, or AEs, or any salespeople who are doing their own outbound, they'll know one of the hardest things nowadays is actually getting people to pick up the phone. So typically, there's a 5 to 10% connect rate for cold calls. What do I mean by that exactly? Essentially, that means that someone actually picks up the phone and is the person you're looking to speak to, not a gatekeeper. For salespeople are the most likely to pick up their phone. So it's more towards 10% because they're expecting a deal to come in, which is why they pick up their phone. And then marketers is more towards the low end, and people like cybersecurity could be like 2 or 3%. So essentially this means you may have to call someone, 10 to 15 times, even 20 times just to get them to pick up once. So these 30 touches is not to have 30 conversations. It's essentially 30 touches to have one conversation, to get a reply or a pickup on the phone, to then have a sales meeting. Something that's quite interesting. So this 5 to 10% connect rate, this is a statistic from a company called Connect and Sell, and they've analyzed millions of calls because they're a parallel dialer. And that's the number they have. I think the average is 4%, or it was 4% pre-pandemic. And actually since the pandemic, it's gone up by 1%. So cold calling is more effective now. 1% may not sound like a lot to a lot of people, but actually if you do 100 calls a day, that's one more conversation you have a day. Or even if you only do 50 calls a day, that's 2 more conversations, a conversation you have every 2 days. So it's actually a very powerful stat. So I think if you have 3 more conversations a week, that leads to 10 more conversations a month. If one of those goes into a deal and you've got a team of 20 SDRs, that's a huge amount of revenue. And then why is it 6 to 7 touches on email, 6 to 7 touches on LinkedIn? Just think about it is that you've got more opportunities to resonate with your buyer, right? You've got more subject lines you can test, you've got more content. So it's essentially just another step. And often people don't reply to you, not because they don't like your message, it's just because they're busy. So that's why we do the high touch approach. Having said that, some people think, oh, you're doing 30 touches, so you're just spamming people, like the messaging is essentially not relevant. Messaging actually becomes even more relevant in this situation. And the reason is that obviously if you're doing 30 touches, you don't just be like, did you see my last message? Did you see my last message, etc. So how can you make your messaging relevant? So when you're starting a cadence, there's probably 2 things you're going to have in your mind, right? It's going to be, what should I automate and what should I personalize? And you can actually automate by using triggers and see more personalized. So triggers could include things like a company's using a particular software that you integrate with, they've got a new product launch that you can talk about, or it could be that they're hiring a particular position. So I know companies that are hiring SDRs are a great fit for our services. But another thing you can do with triggers is not just use a trigger to book a meeting. You can actually use a trigger to send a piece of content. And I recommend on the first couple of touches on email and LinkedIn, actually don't ask for a meeting. So essentially give before you take. Give something that you think is extremely valuable to your buyer. So here's a little example I've got. Jeff, noticed you're hiring SDRs over at Joe Blogs Inc. We have a list of questions that VPs of sales because included as part of their interview process. Interested in receiving a copy. So as I said, just giving before you take, using a trigger here as an example. So this is just an example of relevant messaging. So now I wanted to go into the new cadence, right? So all of that stuff, that's from the cadence from January. But like we said, we've had a pandemic. So what's changed since then, right? What's new? So one is using actually LinkedIn polls. LinkedIn polls is a feature you may have seen. A lot of people are using it for inbound, but you can use it for outbound. I'm going to be mentioning an example of that very shortly. Voice notes are great. Again, it's quite a new feature on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, you have to download the app on your phone. You can do it on your phone, but highly recommend using voice notes to stand out. They have by far the highest reply rate along with video that I'm getting at the moment. Video touches, again, it's like the voice note makes you human. It shows your voice. The video is showing your face and your voice. So I know Tyler's going to touch on that later. And then again, like if you are going to automate, personalize wherever possible. But if you do automate, make sure you segregate your list, because if you have a list of like 3,000 people and you send them all the same messaging, it's not going to work. So break that list down from like 300 into maybe lists of 30 people, or 3,000 into 300. So, and filter by trigger, by industry, by job title, essentially. And then, like I said, wherever you can personalize, do personalize. So the last thing I wanted to do here is show you a particular example of the new cadence in action, and that actually works. This isn't theoretical. Even though I run a business, I still love to do my own outbound. I think if you're a sales consultant and you're not selling and doing outbound yourself, how can you do that? So I wanted to show you a real life example of how we actually recently got a customer that we're currently working with using this cadence, right? So the first thing we did is we created a poll. One of the hardest things when you're doing outbound sales is that you have to make assumptions about the pains of the people that you're reaching out to. And it makes your life difficult as versus like an AE who's getting someone filling out forms, they can do discovery, etc. So you may go through training and you do your buyer persona training and there's like 10 pains on there. You're like, which pain do I focus on? So this is a way of identifying that pain. You can do this through an inbound method, but you can also do this as a first touch in a LinkedIn message or first touch in an email. Hey, would love your feedback on this quick survey. So we did one that's very relevant to us, right? Which is, what is your biggest outbound sales challenge right now? Listed the 4 that I hear most often, which is verified data for prospects, relevant messaging, making the most out of sales technology, and onboarding new sales hires. So then I had a look at the responses and I saw that there was a lady called Florence Broderick, who's a VP of marketing at Carto, perfect customer for us because she actually managed the SDR team. They have about 200 employees. They're a SaaS company. So it's a very typical customer in terms of what we work with. So I said, okay, Flo said that relevant messaging is a pain for her. So what am I going to do? I'm going to send her now a very personalized email regarding relevant messaging. And again, the idea here wasn't to pitch a meeting. It was to give something that I thought could be relevant to her. So I said, morning, Florence, notice that you put in the survey that relevant messaging is your biggest pain when it comes to outbound sales. I have a couple of documents regarding how to build messaging for different channels. Would they be of interest? Flo replies, that may well be yes, thanks. So we essentially have these 2 documents. One is about how to build email sequences. One is about how to build LinkedIn sequences that I thought could help our SDR team. I got her email, sent them over by email and said, yeah, as requested on LinkedIn, here are those documents. She then replies very quickly, thanks, Michael. If I didn't have her number, I could have gone on various number of tools that I think are actually in the cadence you'll see. But luckily, her phone number was in the signature. And I always recommend if you get a positive reply, even if it's not a meeting, call the person straight away because essentially you're top of their mind. So I gave her a call on her mobile number and we had a conversation and I asked her questions around, why is relevant messaging a challenge to your SDR team? And anyway, that started the sales process. Six weeks later, she became a customer. Carto are now a customer. I'm actually a good friend of Flo's. So this is actually a real life example of getting a customer from this tactic. And yeah, if you don't believe me, you're welcome to connect with Florence. I got her permission to use her name in this. So just last thing on this. So key takeaways from the story. And I've been speaking for a while. This is the last bit. Find out the pain first, because as an SDR, it's difficult to find out the pain. So either use a poll or a survey on LinkedIn or email, or if you're doing a cold call, before you pitch the meeting, have a conversation, understand what the pains are of your buyer before you present the solution. 2, go omni-channel, right? Like I started on LinkedIn, I went to email, and then I called her because I knew the phone is the best channel to actually book a meeting because it's interactive. And finally, personalize whenever possible. The poll is something that could be automated because it's quite general, but the follow-up needed to be personalized because I needed to show that I'd understood that relevant messaging was a pain to her. And that's yeah, that's the end for me. I think we've got Tyler coming up next.
That's perfect, Mikey. Thanks, mate. I was just seeing you were mentioning Florence quite a bit there. I was like, oh, please have her permission to be putting that stuff in there. I was thinking I'm going to be getting a lawyer's letter from Florence. But that's a super example. We've spoken about that poll thing on LinkedIn before. I was never really that convinced, because it seemed like it was just one of those functions that LinkedIn pushed out, and everyone was like, oh, this is interesting for 3 days. And then it sort of died a death. I haven't tried it. I still haven't tried it. I'm gonna do it though, Mikey. I promise you, right? I will give it a shot. I'm just gonna check it with Flo first to see if that story is actually true. I'm joking. I'm joking. But thank you for that, Mikey. That was a really good intro in terms of where the thinking and the mentality was behind putting this cadence together. And as I mentioned, you will be getting the cadence towards the end, so please don't worry. But there was one specific question towards me from Marion. Marion, you asked me what SMS tool we use here at Leadfeeder. We actually don't use an SMS tool. I am not a massive advocate of SMS tools for one specific reason, in that it needs to be done on a pretty. Just let me, Mikey, stop moving the screen there for 1 sec. I'll get to that now in a sec. The one thing that I would say is that it's you need to be doing it really on a very one-to-one level. SMS is something that's very, very personal to people. And I pushed out a LinkedIn update recently around saying that SMS is a great tool. And half the people praised me for it, and half the people wanted me shot. So like it was it's one of these things where you need to be very careful with it. So if I wouldn't do it on a mass scale, I'd do it very, very much one-to-one. And if you're asking me which tool I'd use, this very tool is the one that I'd use for that. I wouldn't personally be using a service, but that's just a personal preference for me. Okay, with that, what I'll do is I'll hand it over to Tyler, who's going to bring us through the best way to use video in the Cadence. Tyler's up to you, mate. Here we go. Rocky Balboa.
Thanks, guys. I'm super stoked to be here. And I got to be honest, I was ready to have a big battle, a big confrontational fight with Mikey over his cadence. The 30 touches seemed like harassment, but ladies and gentlemen, I am a convert. And I'm saying this in all sincerity. And it's not because of the number of touches and how he explains some of the math. To me, it's about how you talked about the variety in the touch points in the cadence. Because traditionally, when we think about our our 15 touch cadence, it's usually half of those are emails and half of those are phone calls, and that's it, right? So when you think about a 30 touch cadence, it's like, geez, am I going to be getting 20 emails and 10 phone calls, right? That just doesn't feel efficient. But when you talk about all these varieties, right, that's the thing that gets me so excited about 2021, is that, to your point, Mikey, our cadences aren't just emails and phone calls. They're not just social connects. They're LinkedIn polls, they're videos, they're voice notes. We have this like portfolio of different ways we can connect with people, commenting on their LinkedIn posts, all these little things that make such a difference. And that to me is the magic of what the new cadence looks like. And I am a convert because as I do the math in my head, I think, you know what, 30 touches sounds about right when you're mixing it across those different styles of touch points. So now I'm going to hop into my part, which is to talk a little bit about video in the cadence, which is something that Mikey touched on briefly. And I wanted to just share with all of you what we are seeing today and how people are using video in both LinkedIn and email. So I'm going to start by just challenging all of you with this slide here, which is put yourself in the shoes of your prospects. And you've got your typical email on the left, and then you've got an email on the right with obviously a video message in it. And if you were to see these two messages land in your inbox, which one would be more likely to get your attention? 90% of people will typically say the one with the video. And why is that? Well, number one, it's frankly a pattern disrupt, right? We're not used to seeing these sorts of things land in our inbox. So it's interesting, it's novel, right? 2 years from now, we're all going to be like, holy shit, not another video, right? But right now it's hot because it is novel, it's interesting, it's unique. That's only part of it though. The second thing is you immediately see in a fraction of a second, right? The visual of that thumbnail image tells a story to your prospect. It tells them you are a real human, right? Which is number one for getting over the hurdle of wanting to engage. Number two, if you do it right and you do like Morgan did here and wrote the person's name on a whiteboard and did something else to personalize it, again, in an instant, you know that this message was meant for you and it was customized and personalized. And number three, you have an immediate increase in expectation of value because you all of a sudden go, this person took the time to make me a video. They must have something reasonable to say, right? They wouldn't have put themselves out there and doing it. And I swear to you, all of that happens in a second in the human brain. So you are more likely to click into it and engage with it. So that's where I think the magic of using video in your prospecting comes. Now, you're not going to use it 30 times in your 30 touch cadence. And I'll talk in a few minutes about how many times I think we should be using videos in these cadences. And spoiler alert, I think Mikey's recommendation will be spot on. So with that, to set the stage, how exactly do I see reps using video in 2021? And there's sort of two main channels and three different use cases that I want to just briefly run through you. The first is absolutely on LinkedIn. So as many of you will know, when you have a first connection, you have the ability to send them a native LinkedIn video, which you can do directly from your phone, from the LinkedIn app. You can record and send them a video. But even for folks who aren't first connections, you could record a video using a tool like Vidyard and send them the link to watch that video through other mechanisms as well. So sending them a quick video on LinkedIn is great. The second, though, of course, is sending videos via email. And again, I'll tell you exactly how you can be doing this. But the point here is there's lots of different styles and ways you can use video in your cadences. And what I'm seeing from a lot of different teams is this different thinking of there's ways to just include videos as part of my standard cadence, right? You've got your templates, you've got your 30 touches, and you know, at touch number 3, I'm going to send a video and it's going to be this typical format, right? And that's how you can do this stuff efficiently. So you're not rethinking every time, geez, what am I going to do? It's like, yep, this third touch includes a video that is me holding up a whiteboard with their name and waving. And the point of this one is to introduce myself and the problem I can help solve. And then maybe touch 10 is a video like you see in the middle here of a screen share where I'm going to go to their LinkedIn profile, turn on my webcam, do a screen recording and talk about, you know, based on your LinkedIn profile, I see your title is this. I'm actually working with 3 other people in the exact same roles right now, helping them solve 2 really big problems. I'd love to send you another video to explain the first one and show you exactly how I'm doing it, right? So those are like patterns, right? And those are basically video templates. And you can get really good at those standard messages and crank these video outs really easily. And then the third are hyper-personalized videos for key accounts, those tier 1 accounts, those tier 1 prospects, where you want to go above and beyond. And you say, what's really going to get this person's attention? It would be worth putting, you know, that 15 minutes into it to say, let's do a little bit of extra research. Let's dig into their personal profile and figure out what craft beer they most like, which is what she's not just a heavy drinker. You see she's holding a beer in that video. I'm sure I've talked to her about it. I asked her that question and she said, no. I scoured their profiles and I found that they talked about this craft beer that they love. And I found it at my local beer store and I held it up and I talked about it in my video. So things like that you can do to do hyper-personalized ones for key accounts. So those are things to be thinking about as you approach your use of video in the next year. Now, in terms of when and where in a cadence, this is a graphic that we've typically used with a lot of clients that we onboard using video in their sales process. And you'll see this is actually about a 15-touch cadence over a 30-day period. So I'm going to be going back and asking our team to update this to be our 30-touch sequence with many more different symbols in here, which I'm excited about. But what you'll see here is we typically recommend that you use video a couple of times during the first 6 to 7 days of your cadence. And there's actually statistical data from SalesLoft where they've analyzed millions of cadences and reported back on, number one, cadences that do include videos have a 26% higher response rate. And secondly, they found that the greatest impact on response rate is when videos are included within those first 10 days. And it makes sense, right? Because after that, you're now getting into the long tail of things. But those first 10 days, I think, is where you've got an opportunity to put your face in front of them and to get that message felt. And what's really neat about that is it's not just the response to the video, right? It's the response to the overall cadence. And when you put a video in early on with your face on camera, it immediately changes your email address into a real person, right? And you become more memorable to them. So they're more likely to respond later in the cadence because they'll actually remember, oh yeah, that was that person, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'll check this out now, right? So think about that. And again, we typically recommend 3 to 4 videos throughout your overall cadence. And early on, it's about building rapport. Mid-funnel is now doing screen shares to show them different things that may be interesting or appealing to them. And then, of course, at the end of your cadence, what better way to break off a relationship than with the video goodbye with a picture of like your kids beside you or like your poor dog sitting on your lap or some kind of dependence where they're like, okay, I got to give this person my business. So lots of fun ways you can use video throughout your cadence there. So the last thing I just wanted to highlight here is some of the main best practices. I get asked these questions all the time of like, okay, we're going to do these videos. We'll include them throughout our email cadence. We'll do 1 or 2 on LinkedIn. What are the best practices for actually recording these videos to have the biggest impact? Take a screenshot of this right now, folks. These are my top tips based on hundreds of discussions with different sellers out there. The first is use video to build a real human connection. Be personal, be casual, have fun with it. Don't wear a suit and tie. Don't have it fully scripted. Don't worry about the odd or ah, right? Don't worry about your dog jumping on your lap. In fact, encourage it, right? These are moments for you to create a more human connection to them and show them, I'm a real person that genuinely wants to help you. So that is number 1. Number 2 is think about your attention hack. If this thumbnail image ends up in their LinkedIn profile or their LinkedIn message or their email inbox, What is it that's going to get them to pay attention to it? And again, you see examples on here of personalizing the thumbnail, putting their name in a webcam video, being on their LinkedIn profile in a screen share, being on their website. There's lots of little hacks you can use to make sure that thumbnail image you deliver gets you the highest possible click rate. Think about how you can use standard templated videos where you're like, okay, this one works, I'm going to watch, rinse, repeat it, versus doing hyper-personalized one for key accounts. And finally, folks, you all know the acronym KISS. Yes, keep it short, seller. Less than 60 seconds for these videos. 45 to 60 is the sweet spot when you're doing it with outbound. Anything more than that, and they're not going to watch all the way through. Lots more tips on our website at that article there, vidyard.com/video-prospecting. If you want to take a look, tons of examples, tons more ideas if you want to dive further into that. And oh my goodness. Oh, I accidentally clicked on that link. And obviously, I'm glad I did, because obviously it's the wrong link. I will drop the correct link into the chat window. Andy, I've just installed a virus on your computer. I'm sorry. Not sure how I did it. Okay, cool. So, and I think that's it. The last point here was just, how do people actually do this? Because you're like, how do I record and send videos? If I'm not doing it already, this seems completely foreign to me. And as I mentioned, for LinkedIn, you can record and send videos from the mobile app directly to a first contact. Otherwise, there's free tools like Vidyard that you can sign up, and it makes it dead simple to record a video from your desktop or your mobile phone, send it out via email, or send the link to it via social or any other channel. So if you're not yet using it, give it a try. It also integrates natively into other cadencing tools, which makes it really easy. So that's my story, Andy, and I'm sticking to it. Sorry about that virus.
That's all right. So 2 points there. I hope I don't need to throw my laptop in the river now, Tyler, just after whatever you're after installing in it there. But it also just goes to show, I think, like one of the things, and this has just come to me now since that's happened there, is basically, I think with video, it's important to not have it too scripted. You know, it adds to the authenticity of it. Like the fact that just what happened there, for example, you had that link in there, you clicked on it. Like, we haven't gone and scripted through this, but people don't like listening to scripted things. It's not enjoyable, you know. It's more human, it's more realistic if there's a couple of mistakes made here and there. We laugh about it, right? And I think that's really important for video as well when you're getting it by email. Now, I've had some shockers come in, right? Absolute shockers that have been really scripted. You know that this person has sat down for a half hour, written a script, and then's been like, okay, I'm going to spend the next 6 hours practicing this script for this one specific video. And then I get this and I'm like, this is just awful, right? And it's like, just don't be afraid of making mistakes. It actually adds to the experience, I think, when you get something like that. But I really liked your, that attention break, the attention hack thing there. Like that first, split second that you have when somebody opens an email in their inbox, that's all you have. You only have a split second. And you're lucky even to get them to open it, with right. Subject lines, whatever it is. So if they actually manage to get into the email, you want to be gathering their attention like that, boom, straight in. Yeah. And if you don't have that initial hack, you're going to lose. So it's a really good piece of advice.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to go to somebody that's on the ground, seeing how these things work, testing these things out in real life. Nikki, really happy to have you back on again. We've had Nikki on before. Nikki, really excited to hear what you have to say, and I'll leave it over to you. You should have a share. You should be able to. Hold on, you're muted. You're muted.
Every time. Thank you for welcoming me back again. I have fun every time I come and visit with you. It does require me to make slides, which I got to be honest with y'all, not my forte, but we're going to have fun. So as you can see there on your screen, I motivate sales reps to build their brands and break through to buyers with authenticity and empathy. And you will see that in the way that I approach social within a cadence, because that's the part that I'm going to be talking about. Specifically, I'm going to show you how to tie what you find in your research for personalization into a purposeful phone conversation, into a phone opener, in a way that infuses the conversation with your personality, and that hits on two things, right? So the first, obviously, goal of any piece of outreach is to get the meeting. For me, I'm an SDR leader, and so that's just what happens. But the secondary goal, right, if you don't get the meeting, is to make them excited to hear from you again, or at least make them not never want to hear from you again. So you'll see echoes of that. And here's what that looks like. No, my video is gone. Anyway. It's Meg Ryan, and she's right about everything. And it's this, you'll find that, are you driving it, Andy? Okay, there we go. Okay, so Meg Ryan was right. What rom-coms taught me about starting conversations. And go ahead and put a 1 in the chat if you've ever heard of a meet cute, right? And what that is it refers to in a rom-com when two people, yeah, Erica knows what's up. Two people in a film, they meet in this like really cute way that makes them know and you as the watcher know that they're gonna want to see each other again, right? And so that's this element that from rom-coms that I bring into my cadences. And this Meg Ryan line was her talking about how whatever anything is, it ought to at least begin by being personal. It's from one of my favorite movies, which is You've Got Mail. And I can't tell who else is clicking the things. Okay. Can you help me go backwards? Because it clicked 1 ahead and then everything fell to pieces. Just the second slide for me. There we go. So what does it mean that everything should begin by being personal? It's one of those just nebulous things you see running around on LinkedIn and you're like, yeah, but how, right? For me, that means you have to find a way to genuinely find something that you connect with and care about with respect to the industry that you serve and the people that you sell into. Like, you seriously can't skip that step because you're not going to want to put in the time or the effort as enthusiastically if you can't find something that you really care about. And then all of this stuff that I'm going to show you here in a minute is going to seem like a chore. And so you also must be genuinely curious. That's how you keep a positive mindset in interacting with these people instead of going into it like, I already know what they need. And it's just a matter of me getting them to, be persuaded toward, my way of thinking, right? You have to scrap that and go with curiosity. And then you have to, by extension, become an expert on what matters to your prospect. And I do that with a framework called the 3 C's, right? So it's curate, which is to build your network with people that you want to work with. Consume, which is to understand what relevant conversations your buyers are already having with folks in their network or around their bevy machine or with their colleagues, right? So trying to join the conversation that's already happening with the folks who care about the same thing you care about. And then captivate. That's when you get to have your Julia Roberts moment and just be engaging and get the meeting or get them to want to continue getting communication from you, right? And that's you're using what you learned in those first 2 steps in order to make that happen in a really strong way. And so when you curate your audience, the way that I'm doing that, the way that I have done that, in basically tripling my LinkedIn following over the past 3 months and seeing a lot of inbound interest from that, was just to make sure that I was proactively going after folks in my ICP to be a part of my network, and that I was not having just a volume of folks in my network as the goal. And my favorite, I guess, little insight when it came to that was when you're searching for these folks in Sales Navigator, there is this little category of folks who have posted on LinkedIn in the last 30 days. And because I want to be using a lot of personalization, these folks are the ones who are most often telling me what they care about. So there's this element of that conversation I'm trying to join. This is how you do it. So you find the folks who are already actively engaging in chatter. And this is from put a 1 in the chat if you know what it's from. But it's from the Princess Diaries, right? He's like, why me? And she's like, because you saw me when I was invisible. And if you do this right, if you're going out and proactively finding folks to be a part of your network who maybe, are your ICP, your buyer, but they're not getting a terrible amount of engagement or folks interested in them. This is a way to capture those folks and find that business. So the second one, consume their content. Now, this is not simply consuming content that they produce. It's subscribing to their content streams. So if I sell to marketers, then just making myself aware of, what are the newsletters that marketers typically are subscribed to, who are the thought leaders that they follow, what are the podcasts that they listen to, and that's going to make me able to have a lot more authentic personalization and a lot more genuine conversations with people, because I'm not just as a gimmick using their language. I really am using their language because I've made myself aware of what's really important to them and what conversations they're having. Another favorite of mine when it comes to consuming their content is getting outside of LinkedIn for some of that. B2B SaaS Twitter is like, it's a thing. There are many folks who you may be trying, fruitlessly to get a meeting with because their LinkedIn inbox is, a dumpster fire, but they're not really getting prospected in their Twitter inbox. They're not really having people, a lot of folks. I mean, if I'm looking, your thought leaders that are getting tens of thousands of views on their LinkedIn posts are getting 10 likes on their tweet. Like, that's really what's happening out there. So it's a really easy way to go and get their attention, make yourself known, but also see a different layer of how they communicate, what's important to them, and things like that. And then lastly, join their communities and contribute. Don't just go in there with these selfish reasons. Of course, you have those, but you're going in there because you really want to learn. And there may be something that you can help them with as a group to start to look at the bigger picture of what you really do when you're prospecting, which is not just to set the meeting, but to also build awareness on a bigger scale and sort of create this groundswell of people thinking and talking about you and what you do. Watch. There's no volume on the left. Anyway, y'all know what that is. And it's why I'm wearing this red dress. It's Julia Roberts, who is captivating, of course. And it's because in this moment here in the film, it's all about her. He understood how, like, what she was into, what she liked. And then when it came time to create a moment, he created the moment. And that's what you have to do. So here's what that sounds like on a phone call. So I've gone through all of those steps, and I've become a member of the community, and I've, been taking a look at where this person is appearing online, what their conversation is. I'm going to call them and I'm going to say something like this, right? Hey, Gabrielle, you were on, it's Nikki with M-Train, but you were on the Surf and Sales podcast, and something you said really resonated with me. And I thought, I have to talk to this woman. Have you got a couple minutes? So that's actually not how you got on my radar, but what you said was that, SDR leaders have to continuously be coaching their teams. And that really resonated with me. But it's not how you got on my radar. You're on my radar because I actually work with folks who do what you do, on coaching and on setting them up for success when it comes to that. And so that's how you start that conversation in a personalized way. I do hear a lot of people talking about how to tie in the personalization nugget in an email or in a LinkedIn. And if you do that in the same way that you would do that on a phone call, I do pretty much do it in the same way that I do it on a phone call. So just like I said it to you, an email might start the same way, right? It'd be, hey, how have you been? First of all, I have to tell you what you said on LinkedIn the other day about building inclusive cultures. Oh God, it hit so home. And then you quoted all caps, yes, exclamation point. But more importantly, I wanted to see if there was, you know what I'm saying? And then you just go into it. So that's how you execute on the first two steps, right? After you have completed the first two C's. So in summation, the takeaways, just like we went over, right? Curate your audience or your list using Sales Nav to find people that are already actively talking about the things that you're talking about. So what's the water cooler talk? Who's having that conversation? Who's leading it? Consume the content that they consume and immerse yourself as much as you can in their world, their online world, or in their content world, so that you can be speaking the same language in a more authentic way, and then captivate them with personalization. Because I get my fair share of cold calls myself, and not once has anybody cold called me and been like, yo, I heard you on the Surf and Sales podcast and what you said was this, or about what you said on LinkedIn the other day. People just aren't doing that. But when people do it, there's a woman named Christine Finseth who has an entire framework based on this, and she's getting 80% open rates, 30% reply, and 10% meetings booked. And all of that is what this that I've been putting in front of you is actually based on. So I've seen it work. It definitely works for me. And what I love about it is that you can take these principles and apply them to all the different channels. So you can take these 3 C's and use them in email. You can take this principle and use it for LinkedIn, and you certainly can take it and use it on phone calls. And that is what Meg Ryan and Romcoms taught me about outreach with social.
So thanks so much, Nikki. I mean, when I was an SDR, I wish I watched more rom-coms, actually. Now that you mentioned, I wish I was a bigger Meg Ryan fan back then, you know. But no, super interesting stuff with the 3 C's, by the way. And also, that's funny that you mentioned Christine as well, because we actually had Christine on before a couple of weeks ago, bringing us through that FIRE framework that she's put together.
Yep. Super
interesting. And it's seen, as you said, like massive results in terms of open rates and connect rates. It just goes to show, and I think this is like a bit of a theme that we've seen throughout this webinar, is that the more personal you get, or the more time you put into your research, and the more effort you put in as an SDR or salesperson, the better results you're going to get. Like if you try to push out too much that isn't personalized, you're going to end up burning out and not getting much of a result. So super interesting stuff. And also, Nikki, really interesting stuff that you're doing at the moment, by the way, as well. Just to give you a shout out there on what the work that you're doing at the moment in terms of trying to make a change, and that it's super interesting stuff. And keep fighting the good fight, although it might be exhausting at times, but you need to keep fighting that good fight.
Thank you. I got my gloves. I'm ready.
Good. Glad to hear it. Okay, so without further ado, we'll get to our last speaker today, Gabrielle. So Gabrielle is currently working at a company that probably doesn't need too much of an introduction based on recent news. Gong is all over the place right now, especially in the tech world. They're probably the number one unicorn on the market out there when it comes to tech at the moment. So really interested to hear what Gabrielle's going to say around email now. So Gabrielle, I'll hand it over to you, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
All right, thanks for, sorry, my Alexa just went off. I think I got a package here at the front door, but thanks, Andy. All right, everyone. So yeah, my name's Gabrielle. I'm currently managing one of the SDR teams over at Gong. And so my portion of today is all about emails and cadences. And so before I get into emails, I thought it'd be great to do a little story. So I think, okay, oh, that's not right.
No.
Let's see.
No. There we go.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I had flipped it around the slides a little bit on the back end. So before I get into the story, how about this? I'll talk about the purpose of emails, the way that I've approached emails as a sales development rep, and even how I've coached the sales development reps who I've managed. And the whole idea here is you're going to have, let's say, those 30 touch points over the course of maybe a month and a half. And so an email to me is like how you root down and ground your outreach. It also gives people an opportunity to go and reference something back. So how many times have you caught somebody over the phone and you said, hey, I'm Gabrielle from Gong, and they go, who? Gong? And they start looking in their email, they start looking on websites. And so here you're giving somebody a reference. So I like calling these landmark events or even initiation points in which we're looking for somebody to make a change or commit to exploring about this change. And so in thinking about initiation, I have a story about initiation, probably one that a lot of people know, which is Harry Potter. So Harry Potter, this kid who lives under a staircase, like, why was DCFS not called? I'm curious. But anyways, Harry Potter like has this, there's like some level of awareness that there's something about him. He's not really sure what that is. And he gets a letter. And this letter's like, hey, addressed to him specifically under the stairs. It's like, okay, well, what's going on here? What happens next is more letters come in. People are resisting to like actually responding to these things. And he's still wondering like, what's going on here? There's something special, all the way up to they're out in some godforsaken who knows where, and Hagrid is busting through the door, like bending guns and giving somebody a pig's tail, right? All the way up to the point where he's delivering some level of insights, which is, hey, Harry, like, you're a wizard. And what's Harry's response? He goes, no, I'm not. Like, I can't be this. He's resisting change. He's resisting realizing his own potential. And so this story, right, is what I like to refer as the hero's journey. So if anyone's ever read anything about Joseph Campbell, or if you watched Star Wars or anything like that, it all is aligned to this framework of what does it take for somebody to realize their highest potential. And so there's and even thinking about us reaching out to our prospects, the whole idea here is that there's an opportunity to reach your highest potential. There's an opportunity to mature your capabilities. There's an opportunity to be that unicorn kind of company, if only you will accept the invitation to change, right? So we recognize that, number one, for Harry, he receives a call. There's the resisting his true self. And then here comes the mentor, Hagrid. And from there, he's able to accept his potential. So what else could a hero's journey be? A buyer's journey, right? So like thinking about this journey that we're going to take our buyers on and thinking about what does that require from us in terms of email, we can start mapping out a path that helps them make that change and accept the fact that, hey, maybe I'm not reaching my full potential just yet. And so I've mapped all these pieces kind of across the board, and I'm going to overlay what this means in terms of in terms of what's going on in an account. So everything from like, hey, I'm good, leave me alone, hashtag living my best life, all the way through there's some initiating event, there's some compelling reason to change, but still nobody is making that change. Maybe because we're afraid, maybe we don't have the right resources, maybe we're throwing out all these objections, not interested, I'm good, I'm fine, we're doing it internally, to now, oh wait, I've been exposed to some kind of risk. Like there's something that I realize that I'm missing out on. Now I need to embrace my potential. Now I'm more receptive to seeking and receiving guidance. And so this is what we need to do, right, over emails. So the first piece here is, I'll lay this out. If back when I was in SDR, I laid out my outreach over the course of 30 days. And by the way, I'm American. I know that this specific rhythm and cadence does not work always in other countries, because I've definitely gotten the response like, Gabrielle, I can tell you're an American, leave me alone. So like there's that one little nuance there. So in the day one, like everybody here has talked about personalized content. Like my role here is not to tell you how to personalize. However, I'll offer kind of a framework that I've used in the past, which is, number one, I've done my research and I want to let you know that Nikki had hit on this big time. I looked at this webinar, or I heard you in Surf and Sales or whatever else, and I had to reach out to you. And here's why, right? I heard these things, and there's something that correlates to the way that our customers are leveraging our platform that might be beneficial to you. And then your call to whatever it is, if it's call to action, call to interest, something along those lines. And so day 4, second email that goes out, rather than just doing a bump up email, hey, did you see my email? Hey, da-da-da, that's the quickest way to get off the distribution list, like opt out. And at the very worst, somebody will probably threaten to like report you through canned spam laws. So what I like to do is offer a before and after illustration of like, hey, like here's what you're doing today. Here's what you could be doing. And that's just to get the juices going. Then after that, we're like day 8, I want to request feedback. Hey, like, I sent you this email a little bit, I sent you a couple emails. Would love to get your feedback, right, on maybe that before and after illustration. Or like to Tyler's point, maybe there's a video that you want to share. So asking for feedback, but then also giving what I'll call a universal deposit. So for Gong, it's revenue intelligence as a whole, but I'm not actually getting into the specifics of here's what Gong looks like for you. But that's where like the second round of emails come in. So in the first sequence of email, I would also have this all on one thread. So you have day 1, day 4, day 8, pause for a week, and now recommence and send content that is personalized to that person's role or potentially to their responsibilities in a project. So I'll use sales managers as an example. So I'm like, hey, like I know I've sent you some information, right? Like here's maybe something that's a little bit more specific to your role and what could be most valuable to you. Next deposit, right? 1 week later is, hey, I have this high value content that is, so it's like tips for sales managers on how to like navigate the, I'm gonna just swear, a shit show that we're in right now. So, and then the last piece here is a notice of withdrawal. So what I've done is I've taken this person through a journey. I'm like, hey, listen, there's an opportunity that's here for you to realize your higher potential, to get to your best self, whatever it is. And I'm stringing them along. But at some point in time, like if I'm a good mentor, if I'm a good guide, I also have to cut my losses if this person is not willing and is not receptive to making that change. They're not ready for that journey. They're not ready to buy. So I'm going to withdraw from my outreach to them. Sometimes people will be like, wait, time out. I love this. I want to change. Please don't leave me, right? And other times people are going to go unresponsive, and that's okay. But like this is the role of email in the outreach and being able to give people just, again, those landmark moments to go back and reference. So even though they're getting your calls, you see their voicemails, you have the LinkedIn content, whatever else it is, but who knows, they might be at 10 o'clock at night, bored, and they can go back and reference something that could be very valuable to them. So in closing, I came across this quote yesterday, which is like, if you want to be invited to the party, right? If you want somebody to engage with you, you have to have something to bring. And so emails provide a platform, a canvas for you to bring content, to bring value to them. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Perfect, Gabrielle. Thanks so much for that. Just in terms of cursing, I fully endorse it. If Aaron Ross can drop F-bombs in here, you can definitely say the word shit. I'll allow it. It's absolutely cool. But thank you for that. So Nikki posted something there into the chat there just about you being disastrous. That's absolutely true, by the way. That was really, really interesting. And just interested in seeing those different types of approach based on the certain day. So having that universal approach and then bringing it down to specific user approach, it's a nice way of breaking things down and making things a little bit like more personal as you drip it down as you get a bit further into your cadence. So really interesting stuff, Gabrielle, and thank you for that. Guys, I see that Johnny's after posting the link to the cadence that you'll be able to get your hands on into the chat there. So please feel free to grab a hold of that. We'll also send it out by email afterwards. We have a couple of minutes left. We wanted to go through a bit of a Q&A, but we had such a good bit of content to get through now that I think it makes sense that maybe we just ask if there's any questions from the audience. I'm just going to double check within the Q&A bit myself to see if anybody has asked a question. Give me 1 second. I can see that there's have we seen any difference in response behaviors between public sector and commercial business prospects? Mikey, that might be one for you, mate. You work across different industries. So public sector versus sort of private sector.
Yeah, funnily enough, I've not got much experience selling into public sector. I used to work in politics a long time ago. It's much better, if anyone's listening to this, it's much better working in SaaS sales than working in politics. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any data around selling into the public sector.
Mikey, I always thought you're a bit of a politician, mate. I didn't. I'm just glad now that I know it for sure. Just in terms of that, it is different. I've worked in, or I've sold into the public sector before, into sort of police forces, government agencies, things like that. It's a longer sales cycle, and the buyer tends to be a little bit different in terms of what their interests are. But at the same day, I think it still goes through in terms of you still want to be grabbing their attention. Maybe you don't want to be making, you want to be probably a bit more formal about it, but you still want to have that attention breaker, as Tyler said in his bit, and I think Nikki also mentioned it in hers, and also Gabrielle, so that you have this thing that attracts attention when you do that outreach, that it's still standing out from the rest, right? Because these people are still getting cold outreach. It's probably a bit more formal than it would be in, for example, the tech space. One question for you, Tyler, this might be for you. Does video work for Fortune and FTSE level folk?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have, so I honestly, I see and I hear that video does work for everybody, but you have to be very mindful, just like you would with an email, to adapt your style and your messaging to your audience. So when sending a video to somebody in the C-level, know that number one, they have very little time. They have different priorities. What I will typically do is I will bring up the LinkedIn profile of a person on their team that I think is the right person that I need to talk to. If I'm trying to get to another person, and I'll record a quick video of that saying, hey there, I know you're probably really busy and I just wanted to confirm, is this the right person for me to connect with to talk about our solution? Are they responsible for this in your team? Thanks very much. So there's other ways you can do it, but always adapt your messaging to that audience and be smart about it.
That's perfect. Thanks for that, Tyler. Guys, we're just coming to the end of it now. So we're just on the hour. So there's a couple more questions come in. So if we have like 2 more minutes, guys, maybe we'll just be able to cover them quickly. When cold calling mobile numbers generated by data tools, what's the best way to be honest about it without losing their interest?
I normally go for, yeah, I just thought you were a perfect fit for, I think you're a good match for what our services are essentially. And again, if you relate it to personalization, like Nikki was talking about, you could say, oh, I saw your podcast on Self and Sales and I just really wanted to call you. And then they'll almost forget about the fact that they'd be like, why are you calling me? How have you got my number?
I feel like you would get that concern even if you were calling like a desk number, like their office phone. Some people ask about it, like, hey, how did you get my number? I would just be honest about it. I wouldn't go into too much detail. Maybe a quick little 5-second blurb, like, oh, hey, like we leverage a tool like this specifically. And then go back into like, what's the reason for your call, right? So it's like, yes, I'm answering you. And also like, let's divert back into the objective of the conversation.
I think especially in B2B, people expect some level of cold calling. So it's in the B2C space, it would be different. But in B2B, I think if you're some level of buyer, you should be expecting some level of cold calling to be coming your way. I think if you get offended from that, I think B2B is probably the wrong space to be in. But yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's cleared up fairly quickly. People ask where'd you get my details from? Just tell them. It's a good piece of advice, Gabrielle. Okay, guys, look, I think I speak on behalf of everybody here where I say it was really great to have everybody on. If you need anything or have any further questions, please do link up with everybody here on LinkedIn. You'll find us very easy on LinkedIn. Please do feel free to reach out to me personally if you need anything further. And look, we'll see you again in the next couple of weeks again for another Leadfeeder webinar. Again, big thank you to everybody that we had on, Gabrielle, Mikey, Nikki, and Tyler. A big thank you. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to offer the value that we have done today. So again, a big thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Cheers, guys.